Hey, what's up guys? So today I've got a more casual friendly video because I know a lot of you still have questions on the basics, like how should you build Skirk's teammates. My last video was quite technical, so this was definitely overdue. Okay, so we all know that Skirk teams require only cryo and hydro teammates. Now you can have 3 cryo, 1 hydro, or 2 cryo, 2 hydro, doesn't matter. That's because Skirk has a lot of talents which do require these teammate restrictions. Not only damage boosts like this, but your team also does need to be regularly doing reactions in order to generate void rifts, and absorbing these void rifts are basically how you increase your Skirk's on-field duration. On top of that, we know at this point Skirk pretty much needs Escoffier, and conveniently Escoffier also has hydro cryo team restrictions and requirements. So essentially how you play Skirk is you press a skill, then you can spam some normal attacks, and when you see those 3 dots or 2 dots, you can absorb it with either her charge attack or her Q, and that extends your duration. So the first question a lot of people ask is, I think everyone's come to accept that Skirk really needs Escoffier. The question is, how playable is Skirk without Furina? Let's say you're playing Yelan and Xingqiu because that's all you have. Now recently I was helping a viewer and I did manage to clear Fearless with a team like this, but it wasn't pretty at all. Ronaldo! As you can see in this gameplay, my Skirk's normal attacks were like 20 to 30k, which meant even with pretty decent builds, I was just barely clearing Fearless. So I guess I can show you what type of DPS you'll be getting in the DPS dummy with a team like this. First of all, here's my build: Skirk signature weapon and gallery set. Got a pretty good build here. C0 with maxed out talents. Same thing with Escoffier, maxed out talents, C0. And I've got her on the scroll set at the moment. Just the artifacts, I'm using Escoffier's signature weapon. I'm prioritizing a lot of energy recharge here. I think I'm going to go with this build on Yelan. Where I've got Favonius bow, I've got Favonius on Xingqiu as well. Quite decent artifacts here. C0, maxed out talents, same thing with Xingqiu. Except I've got him on the Noblesse set. Pretty good set, not the best, but not the worst. This is what I have. Now let's see what sort of damage I'm getting with this team. Let's just keep a very simple combo this time. So I want to make this video more of a casual friendly video. $130,000 DPS, so it was not that bad. The question is though, how much more damage would I get if I just had Furina instead? So I'm going to give her a Favonius sword, I'm going to give her a tenacity set. It's a pretty decent tenacity set, not the best. Let's go for energy recharge, HP and some crit, and end up something like this. A C0 with max talents. So you know what, let's just replace Yelan with Furina.
I knew you'd miss me.
This is not a premium team, but let's just see just how much of an impact Furina can have. Again, I'm not going to do a fancy combo, I'm just going to keep it simple. Just using Xingqiu after Escoffier just to maximize the amount of Noblesse uptime I have. You can see Skirk's final hit there is quite a decent amount bigger than with Yelan. Okay, so I'm ending up around 150,000 DPS. Again, I'm trying to keep things simple. Quite a decent DPS increase that Furina brings. The thing is, it's not just about the DPS. Furina's practical advantages are also very good. For example, her Hydra app is just non-stop off-field. Unlike Yelan or Xingqiu, you don't have to be constantly normal attacking in order to get those consistent freezes. So that could be a thing. Furina's freezing could be more consistent. Then there's also the actual scaling of the team. Because Furina buffs your teammates more, as your Skirk, as your Escoffier get more and more investment, the difference between Furina and the other characters will grow. And not even just constellations or weapons, but even just artifacts on Skirk and Escoffier. And not even just that, but even the better combos that you learn on Skirk, the more value you'll get out of Furina's buffs. So now that we've got that covered, I know a lot of people want to know how to build all the different teams. And one of the most confusing things is, how do you build Escoffier? Because you often see her on a lot of different artifact sets. The three main ones being Golden Troop, the Scroll set, and the Noblesse set. The easiest way of thinking about it is the Scroll set, don't put it on Escoffier if you're already playing a Natlan teammate, because they can get the full 40% buff, whereas Escoffier can only get the 12%. So for example, if I'm playing Citlali and she's already taken this scroll set, so you can't stack the buffs, in that case I would switch Escoffier to the Noblesse set or the Golden Troop set, whichever one you want. Either do you want to buff your Skirk more, or do you want more damage on Escoffier. Also, it can come down to which pieces you actually have. So don't bother with Noblesse if you don't have pieces for it. Just to keep this video a bit more casual, I'll just use a universal Golden Troop set. So I'm looking for attack, energy, recharge, and crit stats. For her goblet, you can use cryo damage or you can use attack. Attack will increase her healing, but honestly, just pick whichever one you have. My crit rate is quite bad, but this is just what I have. And then Citlali, if you guys know how to build Citlali, just use her TTDS set, and then you give her a scroll set with just basically just as much EM as you can. You don't really need her burst in these teams, so you want to just stack EM to increase her shield strength as much as possible. So what people want to know is just how consistent is Citlali at proccing the scroll set, and luckily in the DPS dummy you'll be able to see. So the good thing about the DPS dummy is, if you look at the reaction tracker here, basically whenever Citlali will get a freeze, you'll get that scrolls buff for the team. The problem is as you'll see against an enemy like this, you won't get it that often, which means you won't get 100% uptime on that scrolls buff. So you basically just use her skill, then swap onto Skirk. See, she got one freeze right at the end of the rotation. See, honestly, you'll see Citlali does get some freezes, but it's not very consistent at all. Maybe one every 3 rotations. But the good thing is that you're not fighting neutral enemies like that all the time. But anytime you're fighting an enemy that has just a natural aura, and a perfect example of that is a dangerous boss like this, because you're not even just benefiting from Citlali's application and the high uptime on the scroll set, but as you'll see, Citlali's shield also comes very handy here as well. So Citlali's now reacting a ton, so you're getting more damage. On top of that, you're not dying because your shield is actually coming in clutch here, and a cryo application as well is coming in clutch. So that's one of the advantages. So in a lot of content, you might not be getting as much damage as possible with Citlali, but she has the potential to scale really well with hard content. And she's one of the best shielding options you can pick for Skirk, so that's very nice. Alternatives to Citlali, there are some very good budget shielding options. The Dahlia is very good with Skirk. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have him. Who you might have is Layla. I know a lot of people like playing Layla. So what happens when you don't have a Natlan character? I guess a classic example would be Shenhe. Now Shenhe's default build is as much attack and energy recharge as possible, and you do want to pay attention to crit rate if you're using Fab Lance, which is what a lot of people will use her with. Almost everyone will give her the Noblesse set for extra attack. So you can see here I'm focusing on attack and energy recharge. and try and get some crit rate as well. I think anywhere from 180 to 200 energy recharge is where you want to aim for, and trying to get as close as you can to 3k attack. Now if you've got a 5-star weapon, for example, maybe something like this or Shenhe's signature, then your attack will be a lot higher. But for most players, I would say just stick with the Fav Lance. Now as I said before, because Shenhe takes the Noblesse set, that means you can use Golden Troop or you can use a Scroll set on Escoffier. Again, the good thing with the Scroll set is that this will buff the whole team with 12% elemental damage bonus, and this elemental damage bonus is especially quite good because it actually scales well with Shenhe's buffs. They use Shenhe's attack, so buffing Skirk's attack doesn't affect the quills, but it will use Skirk's damage bonus and Skirk's crit. So all that stuff is quite helpful. But for comparison's sake, I'm just going to use the exact same build on Escoffier. Now, Shenhe will, of course, outperform Citlali versus the DPS dummy, but the DPS dummy won't cover all of Citlali's strengths. That's not to say Shenhe isn't like the overall best though. If you try in the DPS dummy, you probably will get Shenhe as your best 4 slot on this team, depending on your team's investments. But the playstyle will be very similar. I'm going to go from Furina to Escoffier, and then you want to use Shenhe's hold skill. Now this is something that people were wondering. Skirk's fuel time is so long that you don't really have time to use 2 Shenhe skills, and Shenhe's hold skill is what buffs Skirk's normal attacks. I guess if you're using Skirk's burst, you can do Shenhe's tap to buff Skirk's nuke. That is something you could do. You can also do Shenhe before Escoffier if you want to buff Escoffier's burst. Do whichever one you prefer, it's really not that big of a difference. You can see even without the scroll set on Escoffier, I'm hitting almost 200k with Skirk's final hit. So the buffs, whilst those quills are active, are significantly better than other teammates. The difference is that you're not going to get quills on every single one of Skirk's hits, so you will drop off. But as you can see, the overall DPS is very good. So yeah, Shenhe, she actually got 1 freeze actually. Doesn't make a difference though, doesn't really matter. Now, will Shenhe be the most optimal teammate for you on your account? Well, it depends. Do you want a shield? Do you just want as much damage as possible? It could even depend on what constellations and what weapons you have, but these are just the options you could play. Now let me show you the same team, but if I switch Escoffier to the scroll set. The only thing I will say is because the scroll set maximizes Skirk's damage, it will scale more if I was going to do some of the more advanced combos. So it's very possible when you go into the training dummy with these different sets that you might actually get less damage. But I don't want to make this video too technical, so we're still going to have the basic Skirk combo. You see my Skirk's almost hitting 200k. A little bit of extra damage that you get with the scroll set. As you can see, I basically got the same DPS. But Skirk is doing a higher percent of the team's damage though. So just as we predicted, there might have been a gap in DPS if I was doing Skirk's harder combos. But this is a good argument for if you're playing the game and you're not a super tryhard, then Escoffier's set doesn't really make that much of a difference. I do recommend going in here and comparing the difference with your own account though. One tip I always give for Skirk teams is make sure you have a lot of energy recharge on the team. It might look weird to have this much energy recharge on characters like Furina or Escoffier. I know in Ike teams you can get away with a lot less, but the thing is with Skirk teams just don't generate as much energy as other teams. In return though, because Skirk is more of a hyper carry compared to other cryo teams, you don't lose out on that much by stacking as much ER as you can. Don't go overboard though. Don't start building Escoffier with like 250 energy recharge. One of the last teammates I do want to cover is a pretty solid budget option that a lot of people do overlook, which is Charlotte. Now, Charlotte is a bit similar to Citlali because she also can wield TTDS which gives her the same offensive buff as Citlali. And then what you can do is you can give her the Noblesse set, which especially compared to a low uptime scroll set on Citlali is probably not even that much worse. I'm just going to build her with attack and energy recharge. Is this going to be enough? 180, that's the thing. Charlotte, you want a lot of ER, so I don't think that is comfortable. So her healing scales off of attack. So you want attack and ER. What do I have now? 217. That should be good enough. Our constellations don't really matter that much. I guess the most important constellation is probably her C4, which gives you extra energy. And I guess one advantage is because Charlotte's a healer, she could allow your Escoffier to worry less about her burst and focus more on her damage. But if you're using Escoffier's signature weapon, you still need to use her burst anyway. So if you want to utilize that, if you want to reduce Escoffier to 100 ER, you could, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Anyway, let's see what the DPS is. So Charlotte should be as good, if not slightly better than Xingqiu as a budget option. You're just trading Xingqiu's interrupt resistance and damage reduction for Charlotte's healing. Plus 3 cryo is usually a bit more comfortable in these teams. So just use Charlotte's tap E and then her burst. Now the question is that ER enough? Well, here it is enough. So I'm running, what, 217 ER on Charlotte? And you can see the DPS is not that shabby at all, to be honest. I guess Skirk does even more of the team's damage because Charlotte is basically doing 0. But that is a pretty good budget option that I would happily recommend. So yeah, overall, Skirk does have best in slot teammates, but there are quite a lot of options that you can just mess around with and see which one works the best for you. They each have the different trade-offs. There's even more that I didn't cover today. Pretty much most Hydro or Cryo characters have some sort of viability in these teams. There are differences depending on the scenarios. Certain teammates could be the best in slot option, but for most players I wouldn't worry too much about the exact differences. Just kind of play around and see which characters you have first of all, and then secondly which characters you can get a decent build out of, and then also which characters you feel most comfortable with. The most important thing is making sure you have these 3 teammates. My personal favorite is either Citlali or Shenhe or Mona, depending on the situation. And I've used all 3 of these quite regularly, even in Stygian, Onslaught, Dire difficulty. But if you're watching this video, you're probably not too concerned with Dire. That was my team building basics video. Hopefully that covered a few things, a few questions you wanted to know. Skirk's rerun is still quite a while away, so let me know if there's more topics on Skirk you'd like me to cover. Whether it's a more casual video or a more advanced video, just let me know and I'll see if I can cover it before her rerun.